That was even before printmakers. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely. It was
yeah,
96, that was.
I remember
And
that.
if I just share the screen, I think I might have a little picture of you at the keyboard, which might shock you. Can you see that, Nikki? I don't know if you can see that.
Oh no,
Oh, you
maybe I
can't
should.
see that. The viewers can see it, but you can't. But that's
Oh
you.
God, look at him!
Oh,
Oh my God! Well, it's like a haircut in lockdown.
and there you are playing with Mike Hall's band. I think a
Oh
couple
yeah,
of years later, look how young Mike looks. You got
is
Pat
that Errol
Illingworth.
on drums?
I think it's Pat Illingworth actually.
Oh, Pat, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, and Matt again. Yeah,
Gosh.
and there you are. They're looking very concentrating at the piano there, Nikki. So, and I have to say, you don't look any older now. What are you do? What if there's any testament that jazz piano playing keeps you looking and sounding young? It's you, because
Oh,
you still look exactly the same all these years later. So
oh.
you've obviously had a great musical life so far because it's kept you really energetic and really productive. So, so yeah. Well, let's talk. We were gonna see you with your jazz orchestra, weren't we, at this festival?
Yeah.
And you were on a series of dates. So, I mean, tell us a little bit about what was supposed to happen with that band, because you did a couple of gigs with it, didn't you?
Yeah, it was well, Kim Macari Stone at the Vortex.
Yeah.
Can we go to? I mean, she knew I loved writing for big band, but most of the stuff I've done before were commissions. You know, for I did the London Sinfonietta and Nijo and various bands, and but never kind of got it together because been busy with other things. And she said, "Right, here's the date. Off you go." So the first gig we did, which was great, got it up and out, and then it took another year, the Vortex, to then say, "Let's do it again." And by that time, we'd already sort of organised an 11-day tour actually,
Yeah.
all
Wow.
over the country. Quite a few in the north as well, which was
Yes.
great. But
Yeah.
unfortunately, you know, like everybody, it's but you know, the promoters have been fantastic. So it looks like we're going to try and do as many as we can.
Oh yeah, I think everyone really wants to and have it at a gig near them, don't they? So I'm sure as soon as things get back on the road, we'll be hopefully be able to see the full belt. And just remind us, Nikki, how many people are involved in that project?
There's 18 people,
18.
so it's a
That's
kind of normal, you know,
big band
lineup.
format. Yeah.
Yeah, but with extra flute with Gareth Lacrane.
Oh yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and everybody on kind of doubles, and so it's lovely with all the bass
yeah,
clarinet and Tori Freestone's a fantastic flute
yeah,
player. So it's yeah, all the
yeah.
colours.
Well, exactly. And this is really about you exploring your arranging and your kind of compositional textures for that big band format, isn't it?
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And you, I suppose, I mean, gosh, having listened to it a little bit, maybe tell us a little bit about how you got up to that point, because obviously you've worked in so many different sizes of ensembles, so many amazing players, from Stan Saltzman and Tina May, Foolish Hearts, So this is your first big, big job. Is this your first big kind of ensemble under your own name, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I've loved running bands.
Yeah,
Whenever, you know, even at all the colleges, even at the local running big bands and bigger
yeah,
groups. And I think even from those first days, we had that incredible experience
yeah,
with Nick Pennell, who was
yeah,
our,
yeah,
you know, great
yeah,
leader of Jazz Northwest. And you know, you can't sort of underestimate the power of that. You know, being put into that when you're younger,
yeah,
and having those opportunities. I mean, it was
yeah,
just amazing. So you know, I think Vince Mendoza before he was famous, so that was a big band.
yeah,
Kenny, big band.
yeah.
Mike Gibbs, even Anthony Braxton. I mean,
Anthony Braxton, yeah,
what kind of
yeah,
experience? It was amazing, you know. So
yeah,
it was interesting. I mean, they're all big characters, you know, big
mm,
individual voices, and that kind of I think affected all of us. You know, I think
yes,
about Andy running the big band in
yeah,
Prague now at the Dry Dock, Mike writing his
yeah,
larger things, and
yeah. And
um,
specifically having that kind of direct contact so early on in your career must have had a quite profound impact on you, on where you then chose to go with your playing and your composition, and what projects, and also maybe which musicians you wanted to get involved with.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a sort of core, I suppose, for me. There was some significant relationships. Obviously, Richard Oz,
Yeah,
the Eminon group, you know,
yeah,
and that was with Mike and Ian Dixon and Errol and Gary cultural.
Yeah.
And that, I think that was a really important band for me. You know, it was everybody was encouraged to write, and finding like-minded people to work with. You know, you kind of had similar experiences, like similar things, but maybe come from totally different backgrounds. It's really an important time. And Steve Berry coming up north. So I had to go over every Friday with the parts with Django written. And, you know, that was with Pete Fairclough, and that was you know, an ear-opening, eye-opening experience, and trying to find where you fit in with all that. But the thing that was great with all of those people, and still those people, the people I still work with, is a kind of openness, and you know, it's anything goes in a way. You know, we're not pigeonholed to a certain music, and I think that's probably for me. When I think about the music I love to play, I love jazz. I do love American jazz. I really love it. But then, you know, I love European music. I love folk music. You know, and I suppose you're going to be, you know, you can get influenced by people, but in the end, all those fusions, I don't know, makes you somebody. If you're honest, you know, you just keep writing your own music, and it comes out as you, doesn't it? You know.
Exactly. Yeah, and I think audiences love to see personality in music as well, don't they? And there's so many people who maybe just play jazz, going through changes, do it without actually managing to put much of a personality stamp on it. And I think that's where you see the difference between like a musician and an artist. You know, where you've got someone actually creating and sharing an identity and with other players as well. And that's something obviously we've seen with you, Nikki, from a very early point in your career, because you know it's a big part of what you do. Yeah, and I wonder as well. Also, how did you kind of find, or how did the piano find you as well? Was that a chosen instrument from early on, or did you kind of accidentally discover it? Or
No, well, I was kind of my dad was a semi-pro drummer, so music was around the house. So we had a piano. But funnily enough, clarinet was my first instrument.
yeah.
And
I think I remember seeing you play clarinet in the malt shovels in Altrincham once, about
yeah.
20 years ago. I think it was with Ian Dixon and Norman Brown. I think it was, you played the clarinet sort of trio of a Duke Ellington piece. I think I'm getting that right. But anyway, yes. So clarinet,
Yeah,
yes.
or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I love the clarinet, you know, and I always do. And yeah, working with Ian is one of the best, isn't it? It's just so it went back in the case, but you know.
Yes.
But piano, it's funny. Piano was always there, in a sort of messing around composition. You know, I used to enjoy accompanying and just, you know, writing a few little things very unofficially as a kid, but spent hours fiddling around. Really, that was what it was. But so when I went to college, in the end, as an alto player, it was inevitable, really, that piano I found more interesting. You know, due to the writing and the possibilities and getting into harmony. Because really, I was thinking about this today. I went to Leeds, which was fantastic for me, but I'd just come from a school, really. I'd come from a school that had a good swing band, and I did the Bedfordshire Youth Jazz Orchestra, but I hadn't a clue. I really hadn't a clue what I was doing. But you know, you're just trying to find sounds, and so piano was always there, really, in the background.
Yeah. And you just slipped in a really interesting word there, accompanying. And I think that is also, there's an art to that, isn't there, Nick? And you've definitely got it, because people choose you specifically to play with them for the various roles that the piano has within making jazz, isn't it? And I think that the art of accompanying, when you're not necessarily at the front, you know, being the forefront of the sound at any particular one, I think that's something which people really cherish in your approach and your sensitivity. So, sorry, it's not a question, but I just kind of, you know, I noticed that.
Yeah, you know, I think, it comes up a lot in, you know, I was teaching somebody today from the Royal Academy, and we were talking about accompanying, and I think, in a way, you've got to get yourself, well, in jazz, really, but you've got to get yourself out of the way, in a way. Do you know what I mean? It's that thing where you're serving the music or the song, and I always enjoyed that so much, you know, that thing also being very much a team player. You know, you notice in the printmakers, really, you know, I don't even sometimes do the announcing because it feels just like a group, you know, very much a group, and very much everybody's equal and everything. So I suppose I remember my the professor at the academy saying you'll never be a concert pianist, and I was like,
Yes.
I
Yes.
don't want it.
Yes.
No, but she said you're really good at playing chamber music,
Yes.
so it kind of makes sense that I went into something very much about composition and playing together and listening.
So it was a promise, not a threat, really, wasn't it?
That's it, yeah.
And also with the piano, I mean, you very specifically play the piano. You're not really sort of someone who has arrays of keyboards. I mean, you play electric piano if you have to, but you've chose to have the piano as your main instrument, and you haven't. That's quite a conscious decision, I think, on your part.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, obviously up north, I had some of the best gigs I've ever done. Actually, places like the Puzzle Hall on my Roland. But I don't know. In the end, I think I decided. Well, partly two things really. Partly because of just not doing the backing and all that stuff and humping gear around. But for me, sound's such a big thing.
Yeah.
I mean, I can think of you can think about a keyboard being another instrument or a synth. I'd be into that.
Yes.
And I did play with Sylvan's band, and on stacks.
Wow.
But all the time I was trying to find other sounds that weren't emulating the piano in a way.
Exactly, I think that because in the early days of synthesizers, they were trying to replicate and replace, weren't they? But now I think we've got to a position where they're making their own sound as a separate instrument. I think there's much more interesting creativity going on with them, isn't there?
Yeah.
And you also, sorry, you just mentioned the printmakers there, which I think a lot of people will be really interested to hear you talk about, because it's perhaps it's one of the bands that, in recent years, people have seen you most with, with amazing people in that ensemble, like Norman Winston and Mike Walker again. And that's a lovely, it's a six-piece, isn't it? But it's a lovely kind of forum for all of those musicians to be themselves, as we were just talking about, and sharing that music and the whole thing being so much more than the sum of its parts, isn't it? I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And don't forget, Steve, you were the one who...
Oh, was it my fault? Sorry.
It's your fault that we together, we need enlightened promoters like Steve. Well, no, I mean it, but yeah, I've always, well, as long as we can go on doing that band, for me, it's always going to be there. It's something, it's almost like a touchstone. We've got quite a big pad and some tunes we were just about to do a few gigs actually with the lockdown. But everyone's going off doing other things with other people as well. And I like that too, that we don't do one intense block of touring, that's it for a year or, so it feels like it's ever sort of evolving and it's a sort of group, we don't rehearse, so it's just coming and...
it's more like a family reunion kind of thing.
Yeah, flying by the seat of your pants.
Yeah.
Which again, I think is a great, I love having that. Because some bands, it's obviously the music needs rehearsing, but...
But you've got, I mean, everyone knows exactly what they're doing in that band, don't they? And you can take it anywhere with them.
Well, you can take risks, can't you? And everyone will catch you. Or absolutely. Yeah. No, it's
and
great.
Mike Walker in that band as well. Now, Mike's someone you had quite a close kind of performing relationship when you were up north, and playing in Leeds and Manchester and wherever. Remember, there was a quartet, wasn't there, with the two of you that gigged quite extensively, and you built up quite a big following for that. Mike's quartet.
It was Steve Brown. Yeah, it was Steve Brown. Yeah, I mean, I see Steve quite regularly with Dave Green and Karen Sharp's band, and talk about those days at the Puzzle Hall. And some of those gigs there were some of the freest things. Do you know what I mean? Because it was young and you play a tune in a very maybe traditional way, really swinging away, and then it would suddenly go off on a So coming to London at first, I sort of struggled with finding people that I could do that with in a way. People think you're bonkers, And it does take, you need some time maybe playing with people before you can suddenly do that. I really value those times. And Mike's been I hear him in all my music really. I know you've got to play with other people, but he always brings 200% more than you can imagine, really. Do you know what I mean? He's just, adds so well. He adds so much to loads of people's bands, but so it's really wonderful, kind of having him in the big band now. You know, so we think back from our days in Oldham.
Yeah.
You know, when he was
Yeah.
teaching there in the
Yeah.
late 80s. You know, we've had this ongoing relationship. You know, it's
Yeah, it's
wonderful.
amazing. It's something to be cherished. I think it's something audiences cherish as well, because all those gigs that you're remembering now, I can remember being quite a few of them, and the audience are just on the edge of their seats, silent all the way through, just waiting for what's coming next. You know, and that doesn't happen every day, doesn't it? Whether you're in the band performing it or whether you're listening to it in the audience, it's quite
Mm,
a treat, that experience, and yeah,
mm.
lots of fond memories there. Yeah. Yeah, and so you, I mean, we're kind of skipping through a lot here, but you've, and we've talked about the printmakers a little bit, but your partnership with someone else very special, perhaps in the past 10 years, has been Stan Saltzman as well. What a joyous kind of duo that's been for you, because two really lovely players with a kind of quite really close synergy and a really compatible sound and approach to harmony and melody. I find it's just a sort of perfect union, I think, for a lot of listeners. But how did that come about with Stan?
Well, funnily enough, well, obviously I knew of him from all those great records and seen
Yeah.
him, but it was the famous Glamorgan Summer School,
Oh
and
yes.
I
Wow.
think all my first kind
Yeah.
of people in London that I met were in from having a blow in a practice room after teaching,
Yeah. Yeah.
and Stan was one of them. He said, "Do you fancy having a blow?" And then this was 1994, and
Wow.
I was still living up in Leeds, and he said, "I'm doing this album with some overdubbing as well, and with his treasure trove." And he said,
Yeah.
"Would you come and do it?" And for me at that time, like doing a duo was like my worst nightmare. Just I'd rather be sat in a group and
Yeah.
not almost hide, but So it was a fantastic thing for me. He sort of, and he's never, he's great, Stan. He's done it with Gwilym, Kit Down, so many musicians. One of those. It's like the old apprentice thing where they don't tell you how to. I know he's never told me
Yeah.
how to play ever, apart
Yeah.
from saying you don't have to play before we'd even played.
Yeah.
Don't feel you have to play walking bass all the
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
He said, "Your time's good. Do whatever you want, but don't feel." That's the only thing he's ever said in all the years, It, and that generation, it's funny, they don't over compliment or anything. It's a funny one, and I don't look for it, but you know yourself when you've had you've kind of related to each other. But just playing with him is every time, and even now he's still writing. That's big lockdown. He's back on, thinking about new projects, big bands, and
Wow. That's
but
amazing.
he's just he's deep in the music, and in jazz as he's
Yeah.
almost like Joe Henderson of
Yeah.
our country. But then you hear him with there's a new album out actually called Double Exposure,
Yes.
which is a duo with John Taylor that never came out.
Wow.
And
Wow.
my
Amazing.
God, Stan on clarinet and
Oh, that's something to really look forward to hearing. I haven't heard that.
yeah.
Gosh. And you also had a couple of piano trios as well going as well. And that, wonder if you kind of, I mean, the piano trio format, it's done so much, isn't it?
Yeah.
How did you approach doing that differently, or didn't you? Did you just think, I want a piano trio to play my music and
Um, yeah, that I
yeah,
think I wasn't trying too hard to
yeah, yeah.
that's probably me. You just want to do your. I mean, the first one was with two Canadian friends I
Canadians,
met.
wasn't it? Yeah,
Yeah,
Canadian, yeah,
and that was playing music I love. So some standards, some. I mean, it was a thing where we weren't going to rehearse a lot, but just wanted to. So some music I loved, of English music and some of mine.
mm,
And then the one with Jeff Williams, I met Rufus Reid when we were writing. They had a lovely little group, part of the London Philharmonic Orchestra, a group called Renga, which is a kind of a pool of players that wanted to kind of branch out into, working with some Indian musicians and improvising jazz musicians. So I went in with Stan and Tim Garland, and Rufus Reid was on one of them.
yeah,
So we kind of spent a whole weekend with them and took our music in. And Rufus, he's amazing. He's an amazing player and obviously part of all that music. But such a lovely guy and so humble, because I think he was about 60 then. This must have been 10 years ago. And and he was sort of saying to the LSO, you know, thanks for having me. This is my first. I've got a new lease of life, and it's feels like almost like me in the big band. You know, you get to a certain age where you feel loads more to say, and he was lovely. And at the end, he said, if you ever want to do anything, give me a call. And I thought he was just mucking about, you know. So one New Year's Eve, I'd had a few to drink, and I just sent him an email. Said, would you? Because I liked him as a person. I mean, for me, that's a big thing, you know, that you feel you can just go and be and not be trying to, you know, play games or box and cocks what you think they want. And so, yeah, I went and did it. So it was lovely, you know. I saw him quite recently, and it's been a nice little relationship, you know. Again, I tried to do some of my music, but I realised when I got there, some of them was the language of maybe some of the harmony was something that wasn't familiar to. So I just binned some of the tunes, and we just played some tunes we knew, as well as we did some JT tunes and some of mine actually, but some of the slightly harder ones, I just thought, oh, what's the point of playing something that's hard and nobody feels comfortable on, you know? Yeah, so.
Wow. You work with piano trios, and that's, I suppose, the kind of almost like the scale opposite of the jazz orchestra at the moment. So you've got those two palettes totally under control and within your kind of sound world. How did we get to? Well, we've talked about how you got to the jazz orchestra, but how did you, I suppose, bring your approach to harmony at the piano as orchestra? Was that an easy transition for you, or did you?
Well, it's been. I suppose it's been. Yeah, it's been quite not experimental, but you know, there's sounds I love, you know, because I love Fat Jones and all, you know, even back to Basie and the more, and Kenny, of course, and I'm massively into Bob Brookmeyer. This is my lockdown session at the moment, which I've kind of slightly missed him, but I suppose I have sounds that have come out of maybe being here, you know, and some of the classical music I've played, and how I can, you know, transmit that to the big band. So some things have been commissions, which has been great, but you sort of have to slightly write for the people you're writing for. Yeah. You know, the one I did for Tim Garland, there was no piano, smaller band, and so I've kind of gone back to some of those charts and fleshed them out. But I've used a lot of different, maybe some others that you wouldn't see. I mean, Stan always used to say, don't get anyone to bring any doubles. People get a bit fed up of carrying, you know, clarinets. But then I thought, no, well, I've got to find the people that enjoy playing that. You know, so maybe it's not the session guys that you might have, you know, got different kinds of people that enjoy playing flute and clarinet and bass clarinet. Yeah, so it's sort of work. I think I'm still in the early stages, I suppose, in some ways, but I'm definitely on the newer pieces, trying sounds, you know, branching out a bit.
Well, yeah, I mean, you're sitting at the piano. There's a tantalizing piece of sheet music on the piano behind you, and I'm not sure whether that might be something that we could hear. And we just thought it'd be really lovely to get a little bit of an insight into how you approach, you know, either orchestrating or arranging or a piece of that scale. And I think you've offered to kind of have a look at one of the pieces called Wild Bird.
Yeah, I could just say, I'll tell you a few bits about.
Absolutely.
Yeah, this was a piece. Actually, Nigel commissioned it initially with people like Tom Barford and amazing players in there. And it was part of an album. It's coming out quite soon, actually, featuring women musicians, so writers, or Norma's on it, and lots of other great ladies. Yes. And so I thought, right, you know, I was thinking about how I could write it, and I saw Jerry Allen had passed away a year or two before that, who was one of my heroes, and it's funny, she's kind of so underrated. I'm not sure why, because she kind of has been influenced all the Craig Taborns, Aaron Parks, all these people, and this postmodern piano, and she's so strong. Yeah. Maybe it's because you can't categorise her in a way. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes you can't put her in a box. But anyway, I thought, right, that's going to be my
your inspiration,
inspiration. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
So, and I was trying to think about the things. Obviously didn't want to copy her sound or anything, but I was thinking about the first tune I ever heard, which was on an album called Etudes with Charlie Hayden and Paul Motion.
Oh
Trio,
yes.
great
Yeah.
trio.
Yeah.
And Lonely Woman, the
Yeah.
Ornette
Yeah.
Coleman tune.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Yeah.
it's all based around this drone, a D pedal.
Yeah.
So that was one of my ideas. I didn't want to start, because being a piano player, it's very easy just to go in with chords and sometimes those kind of parameters, stopping yourself, um, it makes you write in a different way. So the actual main tune, there's an opening. I wanted some slightly darker chords, but maybe not hers, but Mike, and only a very restricted thing of only 4 notes. So I was again putting parameters on it. And the opening would be on. Well, we might hear it later, but it's much more the woodwinds and trying to take the thing on a bit of a journey rather than just the traditional head solos, backings.
Yeah.
So it starts with this opening that then kind of goes into this D pedal, into a more up-tempo thing, and just a line. And again, I found it really, it's very easy to think, right, I've got 18 musicians, in they go. And most of my charts I've gone back and taken out, like especially in those opening, unless you're going to do a kind of great big, tutti at something that's going to unravel, go back and maybe just 2 instruments.
Less is more.
Less is more. So that's been a good process for this. And I mean, I'll play a little bit. I'll come back to you. Is that okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I hope you can hear it. And at the time, I called it Wild Oak because for me, Jerry Allen's. Her playing's really rooted in the tradition. So you really hear that kind of rootsy thing. But on the other hand, it's kind of it's very forward. It's quite free and open. So that's what that means. So this opening literally just starts with it's like a Les Dawson moment. So just get this, just B flat like this. So these are just horns. It's all very quiet and mute, so the last little entry of this. That's just the kind of opening, mute. So I'll just play a little bit of this. So the next bit is just, again, I wasn't going to go straight into the tune because I'm still kind of keeping you back. So it's just literally the bass. And I wanted just some splashes of paint to really colour. So it's just piano on this, I don't know if I can play. And the groove is, keep going. Go straight. All the flutes in there now, tin mutes, so still kind of brewing. And then finally the tune's here. So there's all that preamble. So it's all there's flutes. tin muted things, all just splashes of colour, all with all that going on, building up to the inevitable. So I think when you're writing big, I've learnt a lot in some ways about like really knowing where you're heading for.
Mm.
Do you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
so all of that happens before even the tune comes in.
But it's all about building drama as well, isn't it? You're
Yeah,
setting a scene, you're making people wait, as you say, and you're kind of, you're getting them. It's almost like when people are coming into a theatre and settling down in their seat, getting ready. You're kind of trying to get everyone focused in and building up to this moment as well. Yeah,
that's right. And I mean, there's just, I'll play a few bars, but I won't go on.
Yeah.
So it's just the tune is still two parts, so no harmony. Yeah. And then the tune comes again with some harmonies. Still nothing about chords yet. So that goes around some, and then contrasting section. And the band's building up. And then this pedal. And then a big, I can't play. Whoops. And the full. So that's where we're kind of heading for. Do you see what I mean? Sorry, I can't do the whole big band.
Yeah.
And then after that, we just go down much. There's another little bit which has loads of stops with drums, and I layer that up, and then finally we go into the solos. So it's kind of, but it's all kind of linked in a way. You know, there's you have to kind of learn how to develop.
Exactly, because you know what you're doing, Nikki. I think you're just not just writing a piece of music. You're It's like all the art forms. You're kind of painting a picture, and you're almost like starting from the blank canvas, aren't you? And you're bringing the viewer in at the beginning when you've got your paintbrush ready, kind of like dabbing the first bit of red on, and you're showing everyone the fact that you're painting. You're not presenting them with this final thing. And I think what's also really interesting, I noticed when you were playing, especially earlier on in that illustration, Nikki, was how kind of closer on the piano the notes were. You're not flying around all over the piano being pianistic. It's actually the sounds are all coming from limited range, aren't they? Oh, I mean, not limited is the wrong word, but a kind of a kind of set of notes that are maybe only a couple of octaves from one end to the other.
Well, in a way, I mean, even being a piano player, I sometimes, you know, I often talk to students about thinking about not thinking in terms of piano. Do you know what I mean?
Singing in your head rather than on the instrument.
Yeah. But it's funny. I think for me, you know, getting inspired by other things other than music has always got me going more to get ideas. You know, just visual things or like I had. I just put a score in at the international. What do they call it? The International Society of Jazz Arrangers and Composers. They were calling for scores. This COVID thing. It was on the first week, and I got one of the commissions, which is great. So, and I was trying to think. I didn't want to have anything depressing, but I've done something. I've written a piece called "The Cage Bird," and it's been good. I've very, very quiet and intense. I mean, it does go. It has a bit more of a shape later, but that whole thing of quite clustery and quick with brushes in between, quite a fast swing thing. You know, imagining being stuck, and it came much quicker than thinking I'm going to write 16-bar thing with all these slash chords.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
So yeah, it's good to get out of the just music box for inspiration.
And then, of course, the piece that you've just kind of brought us into there, Wild Oak, that then translated to an orchestral piece, didn't it? The jazz orchestra piece.
Yeah.
And I believe, have we got? I think we've got an example to listen to, haven't we? Of
Yes, it's
that
actually
piece being
Nigel.
played.
It's
Yeah.
the only
So the
version
National
so
Youth Jazz
far.
Orchestra recording of this piece, which I think
Yeah.
Nikki's now able to set up for us to have a listen. So you might be able to talk us through some of the previous examples, how those are then reflected in the kind of textures of the instruments as well.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. I'll just give you a few minutes to get these.
that's okay.
So French one. The close notes sound so different. There's a little mix of colour from here. Lovely flute. Nice bass colour. Here we go with our D drone. Splashes of colour. Added to the colour. Second line there on the trombones. Slightly more density. Contrast in the section. Make some foxy drops in the bass there. So building here to the inevitable. So this is a little bit of an interlude now, something that maybe takes us somewhere. Same progression but adds the trombones and the bass component. Same thing adds a layer of saxophone. Building. Come on, the trumpets, another melody. backings here, just semitones. Last phrase. Back to our tune. So this, instead of the middle section, I roll into the middle section to make it. A bit where it jumps to the. So I missed that section. So it's a bit long.
No, but that's amazing. Just to hear the kind of listening to a piece of music, you never have the chance to have a talk through of the creator of that kind of bringing out those different textures and the idea. So it's such a privilege for us really to have the first hand, all those details being brought out, and you can hear. But it's so striking how different it sounds to the first version you played at the piano. I mean, okay, some of the notes are the same, in terms of pitch, but the whole the whole created piece is a completely different animal, isn't it?
Yeah, sound waves in the room, isn't it? And kind of resonance Yeah, it's amazing. It's funny, the things sometimes that you write on piano that you think, God, that sounds a bit out there. You put it onto the instruments and it sounds quite normal, or the other way around. Do you know what I mean? It's really fascinating because this is why I wish in this country, maybe I should do it in my old age or something, but I wish there was almost like a vanguard band or something, or an arranger's orchestra that you could come and try things out as kind of slightly experienced writers. Because even us, Julian Seeger was saying the same, we've all done tours, but it's all by the just trying it and then you've got a gig rather than actually going back to the drawing board and having a few goes. But, it does make you kind of produce and you can tweak as you go and you learn a lot,
Yeah. Because it is so hard to get those numbers of people together, isn't it? And the whole economy of it, the practicalities, and even just one rehearsal, it's quite an investment of people's time. So it's even more incredible that things sound as amazing and polished and creative as they do, when you're listening to the music on that scale. When you kind of look at the potential barriers to it happening.
I know, yeah. And imagine after you've been on the road, we'll get it together, but then you go to another level, don't you?
Yeah.
You know what's coming up.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. And an interesting thing, during the piano solo in the orchestra's rendition of that, where you were kind of reversing the role of the accompaniment that we were talking about earlier, right at the beginning, approaching the piano as an accompanying role. You had then the horns accompanying the piano.
That's right. Yeah.
Solo, didn't you? You pointed that out. Yeah,
there's actually one of the tunes, another tune I've written, where I've actually got the piano and guitar playing the whole tune, and the 18-piece big band are on the, it's all on kind of bass clarinets, but it's a bit like Speak Like a Child, the Herbie thing, where the tune's on the piano and everybody else is.
And
you've
of course,
rethink them, rethink
exactly, turn it on its head. And that, I mean, let's remind everyone what you started out talking about, the Ornette Coleman piece, which was just built on a drone. So, when you kind of think about inspirations for things, which can often be very abstract and removed from the piece of work that eventually gets created, that it's inspired. And, because we've probably all, 15 minutes after you mentioned that, we've forgotten about that inspiration. And now we're looking at this, the final piece and the detail and the texture and the layers and the energy in that you were talking earlier. Actually, it all came from that one, the drone piece that Jerry.
That was the start of the whole thing.
Yes, it's amazing, isn't it? And you would never know that, really.
No, it's good, isn't it? Just to it's okay to be inspired like that, or
absolutely,
isn't it?
Yeah. And I think that that's part of full creativity, isn't it? You kind of borrow a bit and then you put your stamp on it, and it becomes has a life of its own and your own thing. But that's amazing. So that's an example of one of the pieces that the orchestra now has in its repertoire, isn't it? How about the others? The others are mixtures of your own compositions and arrangements.
Well,
just
all of them are mine, actually, apart from although I've now written a new one, so one of the ones that aren't mine might get binned. But I do two non-original ones, and they're definite reasons why I picked them. And one is a quite wild version of Do It Again by Fred Sturm. I don't know if you know Fred Sturm. He's an amazing arranger from America.
Wow,
he's just died actually recently, but it's a like burning. It's on the video and the concert that we're broadcasting through you. That's on there. Mike, roaring. But it's that one because I love Steely Dan.
Yeah. Yes.
And Mike introduced me to Steely Dan when I was in Manchester, and it's passed through to my kids and the school bands and everything, and so that's in there. And also a piece by Vince Mendoza called Hero with 1,000 Faces, which we played with him in that Creative Jazz Distro. So I just fattened up his arrangement. He got a small arrangement with French horns actually. So we do that. Really, for me, it's for old time's sake, and I just love that tune.
Well, I was going to say,
it all sort of sits in there.
Yeah, you've got so much to draw on in terms of the history and the playing experience and the people that you've worked with. I mean, how do you choose for a start? You've got so much, not just repertoire, but people, the players, that you could draw from as well. I mean, that's...
Yeah. I mean, it was, in a way, again, it's that thing where you can get a session band, great players. But I really wanted people that have been in my life from the start, and new friends. I mean, Henry Lowther's 76, I think, and
Wow,
Harry,
yeah.
who's a northern lad.
Yes.
Harry went
Yeah.
to Chats.
Yeah.
He's about 19. He's in the academy playing trombone.
Yeah.
But Andy Schofield's coming over from Prague.
Great. Yeah.
Karen Sharp from my days in Manchester,
Yeah.
baritone, and lots of, and Nick Smart. So it's full of friends and people that know mostly Steve Watts, and the only new person really for me, because Martin France was going to do, but he couldn't. He was on tour with something else, so I had to cover half the gigs. Was Ian Thomas, who was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
So he's become a new friend, and I mean, he did such a great job, So it's
good, and it's obviously really important to you because you teach as well. How often do you discover new young people? Like you just mentioned, coming through, and how is it important to you then to kind of bring those people into your own music making and
I love
spread
it
to generations?
I mean, because it's very easy, isn't it, just to get into your scene of about trying to get more women involved, giving more women opportunities. So many, I don't think it's sometimes, I wasn't going to go into this one, but just if we kind of go that way, so many musicians play with their friends, don't they? They play, which mostly is blokes, but and same with me. I could carry on just working with the people I love working, but the great thing about teaching at a place like the Academy, you come across these amazing young musicians. And I had a band, we played at Manchester, didn't we? With
Laura
Josh.
Jurt. Oh, was that with Laura?
Yes. Josh Arkaleo.
Yeah.
And I've been over the years, I've done a quartet with Jeff Williams and Steve Watts. And James Madron. I mean, they're incredible musicians, aren't they?
Oh gosh, yeah.
And I like that thing. It's the same with the printmakers. I really like that thing of mixed generation bands.
Yeah. I think everyone learns, don't they?
Yeah,
it's a two-way thing as well, because you can see, God, what a great opportunity it is for those people at that stage in there on the stage, with people like yourself, and what an amazing kind of learning experience as well, and to listen to as the audience, to see that a bit of rapport and a bit of challenge as well, because you both of you are probably, the youngsters are probably a little bit scared of being on stage by, oh my God, my heroes when I'm playing with them. And then, occasionally you might be thinking, wow, they're better than I even thought they were. I better watch out.
Some of them are quite confident.
But
it's like the trombone section is actually like, because Gordon Campbell, who plays with everybody, and Gordon's the wise old guru, not old, but he's obviously the same age as in Henry, and he's fantastic, so positive and so experienced, and he calls them my boys, because he's got a couple that graduated. Richard Henry's on bass trombone, is really experienced, and then Harry, and they've been taught by, two of them been taught by Gordon, and Gordon always gets them gigs with the radio big band. It's that, again, that apprentice thing. It's just a great thing of just sitting in with people, isn't it, and then hearing how it should go. And
absolutely, yes. As you yourself did, Nikki, years ago across the north of England, when you started out your gigging life after Leeds, and it's like a cyclical thing, isn't it?
It is, yeah.
Well, Nikki, it's been, we could go on. These chats have been lovely with everyone.
Get the wine open now.
Exactly, yes. Yes. Well, it's been a joy and such a privilege to be able to sit at the piano with you and bring the listeners into some of your insights into your approach to creativity and arranging and orchestration, and talk about some of your memories as well, and also what's coming up, because after all this has passed, we're all really looking forward to hearing yourself and the jazz orchestra on the road.
Thank you.
That's going to be an exciting, whatever that does is going to be an incredible, isn't it? It'll be such a release.
Oh God, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. It's going to happen. And somehow, even if we do it for nothing or something, I don't know. It's going to.
Yes.
It's got
great.
to.
Absolutely, must go on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Steve. It's really lovely to
pleasure.
Chat with you.
Absolutely pleasure. Absolute pleasure, and it's great. Thanks, and thanks for being Nikki as well, because we need people like you, Nikki. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. Yeah,
thank
take
you,
care.
Nikki Iles. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Nikki Iles, what a joy it was to sit within a living room like that. Such a gorgeous insight into some fantastic music making. And yeah, a sheer pleasure to be with Nikki there for an hour.
And I'm totally smitten by that track, Wild Oak. So I'm glad that that was the one that she sort of focused on. I think it's a wonderful combination, the sort of the large ensemble, but also being able to speak in a poetic and subtle, elegant way.
Absolutely, yeah. And talking of live now, we have a live performance coming up in the next minute or so from someone. Now, I first came across this amazing artist in Rotterdam at a showcase, and a showcase is obviously off the radar for a lot of us at the moment. But her speciality is Ladino music, reviving this ancient language and song. And she's a composer, pianist, trombonist, singer. Wealth of talent, and she's got such a special way, an incredibly powerful voice. She's been doing some Monday night live streams on her Facebook page from home. Delighted that instead of her gig at this year's Jazz Festival, she's agreed to perform especially for all of us here at MGF this year. So now we go live to the living room in Amsterdam of the wonderful Nani. Nani, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Such a strong performance, so confident, and such beautiful music. Thank you so much for that incredible show. All from the I wouldn't say comfort of your own home, but your own home. I'm sure
It's interesting during lockdown how many insides of musicians' houses I've seen. You know, their workspaces, their living rooms. It's like being a nosy neighbour. It's great.
Is it comfortable anymore after we've been here for so long, you know, but without being let out? Anyway, now, Deborah, coming up for the next hour, we've got a couple of programs in the festival this year that we asked Ben Cottrell of Efpi Records to put together a special feature on some of the Efpi Records stable artists who are trying to figure out how to create improvised music under lockdown conditions. So Ben is someone, is such a great force, Ben, I think, in Manchester in the UK, isn't he?
Oh, he is. I mean, he's got a quiet presence in some ways, but the guy is like a sort of a steel rod of getting things done. He's helped out with Match and Fuse, which is one of the projects that I work with. And also, at first, I didn't realize how important this was, but he's made such a stand for the large ensemble, with his with the band Beats and Pieces. And actually, it's right that we offer audiences the chance not just to see sort of duos and trios in jazz, but also that we carry on waving the flag, something which is maybe more orchestral, or you know, that can create sound in a different way with this massive range of instruments on stage at the same time. So I think they're a really, really interesting bunch, guys.
So this is going to focus on a couple of the artists in the stable, of course, and Ben's put these programs together for us, especially for this festival. So really excited to look forward to what some of the musicians have been working on in lockdown.
Hi, and welcome to Efpi's online broadcast for the Manchester Jazz Festival 2020. I'm Ben Cottrell. I run Efpi Records. We are an independent label, musician-run label based in Manchester, and we work with a wide variety of musicians across all areas of kind of jazz, experimental, improvised music. And one of those musicians that we work really closely with is Johnny Hunter, drummer, composer, improviser extraordinaire, leader of his own quartet, leader of his own large ensemble, and a key member of ensembles alongside people like Adam Fairhall, Corey Mwamba, Martin Archer, Kath Roberts, Anton Hunter, many, many more, I'm sure. Yeah, Johnny, thanks a lot.
Cheers for asking me to do it, Ben. I appreciate it.
Not at all. So yeah, you've been busy over the past few weeks.
Yeah. Anything to keep sane during this really strange time. It's obviously really hard for everyone, all of us musicians, not getting to play with each other, not getting to make music, not getting to improvise. So I was keen to not let that get me down. So I took it as a challenge to just try something new and write some new music that might be that might be benefited by our current situation, trying to find something positive in the situation and try and find something new to come out of it.
Yeah, because improvisation is kind of central to a lot of, most things that you do. I think that'd be fair to say. And obviously with kind of things as they are at the moment, that's a bit more tricky. When the stuff that you do is so reliant on kind of obviously listening and reacting to what other people do, but also just kind of indescribable things in the room in the moment, I guess, which obviously doesn't really work when you're not in the same room.
Absolutely. And this is so. I noticed quite soon after the lockdown was announced that a lot of musicians were putting out a lot of remotely recorded music where they'd, the drummer would put down his part and then the bass player would put down his part on top of that, and all you get from that, I mean, in our music, that is not, I'm talking about other forms of music, but certainly in like the heavily improvised stuff, all you get is just a not very good version of what you would normally do, and so I was really keen to try and find something that would. Sorry, I just got a notification that was really loud in my headphones. I was really keen to try and find something that I could do that kept some of the spirit of what we were doing previously, and without just resorting to these layering up everyone's parts and just creating this very neat product, but there's absolutely no interaction, and because you don't improvise in that way, do you? Interaction, but there was, well, certainly at the time there were no ways that we knew of for doing improvisation remotely. So in real time, there are a couple of ways that people have found, but they still have their problems. But at the time, I didn't know about them and was just thinking, well, just because of the latency, because of the delay, there's just no point in trying, because every musician will just be essentially playing to a pre-recorded backing track, and the response you get from people is so delayed. If you play something, it takes however long to get to the next person, which he might react to you, but then it takes it can take up to 5, 6, 7 seconds sometimes, depending on people's connections. So I started thinking, well, why don't I just accept that is how it is, and try and write some music that incorporates that into the tune itself. So that delay is built into the piece, and because of my technological limitations, my technological know-how, and just the gear that I own, I don't have much stuff, and I don't really understand an awful lot of it. I went down the route of writing some pieces of music that can be recorded separately and just jam them together, which I know is not much different from just layering it up. But what I was trying to get from this music was the sense of fun that you get from improvising and creating on the spot. For me personally, if somebody says, okay, you need to do exactly this thing right now, I can't do it, and I really struggle with it. So the idea of having to put down a drum track that the bass player then, having to hit all these things in the right place, it's quite stressful. So that idea of layering it up like that, I was adamant I didn't want to do. So I was trying to do something else where it just it had some of that same spontaneity of improvised music, that same idea of not knowing what was going to happen. And so I devised 3 pieces that sort of used that and played with that and experimented with it, basically.
Yeah, I think that's a really cool approach to kind of work with the limitations of the situation and not kind of try and figure out ways around them, just kind of accept them, like you said, and kind of, right, this is what it is. How can I use that in, make some good music because of those limitations rather than in spite of them.
Almost. Yeah. And I should just say, this is obviously my personal feelings about this. I've heard some great stuff that people have done using those more traditional ways, or using different ways. So I mentioned to you just before we started recording what Kit Downs has put together. It sounds absolutely incredible, but my God, there's a lot of work that went into that. I think I gather he got his musicians to record multiple takes of the same tune, but with different approaches to each take. So like one where you just play the tune, and one where you're a bit more a bit freer with it, and then one where you just really go for it. He just like chopped it up and edited it together, and it sounds great. But I mean, I don't have the patience to do that, or the know-how to do that. So I was not going to do that. And the other end of the spectrum was the Geo, the Glasgow improviser, who have been having regular Zoom sessions where they just play over Zoom, and they've just accepted that, this is what is happening. These are the limitations we have. Yes, there's this delay. Yes, the quality's not great. Yes, it keeps cutting out. But that's just part of it. And as improvisers, we adapt to it. And I really like that. But I thought it would be too frustrating for me to, have essentially like a room full of musicians and not get to really do the things that we were that I like doing. But yeah, there's interesting approaches.
So with this approach, you came up with, like you say, 3 pieces that actually have formed the basis of a new EP now, with your quartet, right? And EP called, Studies in Lockdown, kind of.
Because that is what they are. Yeah.
So maybe let's have a quick chat about those 3 pieces and the kind of different approaches in each of them. So they were recorded with your quartet, your regular quartet. So that's you on drums, Seth Bennett on the bass, Graham South on trumpet, Mark Hanslip on saxophone. All musicians that you play together a lot with, both in the quartet and in various other contexts. So you kind of know each other pretty well. But obviously this is a kind of, as you've already talked about, a completely different situation to almost every other gig that you've ever played, I guess. So yeah, let's go into a bit more detail on some of these pieces.
Okay, so the first piece, which I've called Study Number 1, is in let me get my notes. So yes, so the first one I wrote, there's sorry, Ben. Edit this bit out. Actually, I've just completely forgotten which one was the start. Yeah, okay, sorry. And we're back. So the first study, there is a melody which for both of the horns, which there's no bar lines. There's a tempo given, but that's just as a rough guide, and the direction for the rhythm section to do like textural rumblings, but this one had timestamps throughout the chart, and so I just arbitrarily said it will be 6 minutes long. Oh well, no, I didn't. Sorry, I had it moving from section to section every minute or so. So there's got these 2 themes which it moves between, but there's a timestamp to say, roughly when you hit this bit, go move on to this. So there's a short melody and then a bit that says improvise. Now I'm fortunate enough that I know when I write that for my musicians, they know what I mean. They know improvise with the written material. Don't just go off on one. And also that I know that they would be sensitive enough to think about what other people might be doing as well. But so this piece, it also has a rhythmic cue which brings in something which we play in unison. So it starts out in this cacophonous way, or semi-cacophonous way, a bit like Don Cherry or Albert Ayler, where they've got these really strong melodies, but there's like just rumbling from the rhythm section behind it. It's that sort of thing. And then there's a simple drum cue, just that counting in the next section, which brings in something quite surprising. It's like, you don't expect it as a listener. And then that leads into another guided improvisation where I've given them a figure which they can improvise with however they want. The reason for that was that I was hoping it would create a unity. So we're not playing, I should say this actually, when these pieces we're not playing at the same time, we're recording our parts separately. That's I went down that route because I was just exploring it basically. I went down that route because I'd kind of written off the real-time live thing because I didn't think it was possible.
Yeah.
What was I saying? Come on, were you listening, Ben?
I was. So when you say that you were recording all separately, like were they hearing anybody else as pre-recorded stuff, or were they just recording kind of with the timestamp, with the stopwatch?
Yeah, so that's right. So let me think. So with all three studies, they're designed to be able to. It doesn't matter who goes first. Anyone can go first. The bass player could put down the track first, or the trumpet player can. It doesn't matter. And I was throughout each of the pieces. I was mixing it up. The point of that was I was just trying to get a bit more spontaneity, or a bit more of the unknown in there. So if every track was like, I put down my tune first, then Seth puts his down, and just get boring. And I don't like doing that. Not having anyone with is awful. But so in theory, it doesn't matter who goes first. In this recording, I think I went first, and then Seth put his bass part on top of mine, and then we sent that to the horns, and then they put their parts on top of that, but they didn't hear each other doing that.
So they were both playing to just you and Seth?
They were both playing to just me and Seth. And what I was trying to get from that was this idea of the unknown. If Mark was to go last, for example, and hear what Graham had done, then he can play off Graham. And it seems a bit unfair, the person who goes last always gets the best,
the easy gig.
Yeah. So I wanted to just shake that up a bit and try something a bit different. And so, but instead of, it's not like I've just written a head and then solos and then a head or whatever. I've tried to, with this first study, have these timestamps where it moves through a composition, and we all move on at the same time. And the improvising that happens isn't just free improv, and it's not just like bebop licks or whatever. It is very definitely based on the written material. So the in the first half of the tune, there's two themes that come in and out, and so the improv is very much based on that. So even though people aren't hearing each other, there's definite unity between what they're doing. And so I thought this served two purposes. Firstly, the listeners will, listeners will find their own connections in this music anyway. Martin Archer, who I work with a lot, does this an awful lot, where he'll take things from different sessions and just smash it all together. And I remember him telling me a while back that he realized a long time ago that people will just hear the connect. People will listen to two sessions that were smashed together, two sessions that were from 30 years apart or whatever, smash them together, and they say, "Oh God, that band sounds really good. You're really locking in." And so the audio listener will make their own connections. So that's kind of what I was going for, like the sense of spontaneity from free improvised music that you get. Maybe that sounds very. I don't really mean it like that.
No, it makes sense. I've heard other musicians talk about that as well in the recording process. That actually, sometimes if you whack someone's solo, improvised solo, that's over, one groove or vibe or chord progression or whatever, and just put it over a completely different solo, a completely different kind of background or in a completely different setting. Sometimes they just magically work, and or maybe it's not magic. I guess there's some kind of process behind it. But
yes,
yeah.
And so the second point, and the most important reason for my method, the compositional style of writing, these themes that people will base their improvising on. And as I say, my quartet know what I'm after when I write that. But just having these little improvisational devices written in, it also makes you, when you're improvising, makes you feel like you're interacting with something, because you have something there that you're responding to. It's not just completely free. It's not just responding to yourself or your environment. There is something very definite in front of you, and these are only very simple ideas. Like there's in that piece, there's one idea which is just deg gum. Is that sort of idea. Whatever you want with that, just two quavers and a crotchet. You can do whatever you want with it, but it's that sort of simple idea where you are definitely building something off of that, and the fact that the rest of us are also building something off of that creates that unity. And I found whilst doing this, and I suspected this would be the case, it does make you feel like you're interacting with something, you're responding to something, not just putting your part down, and not just putting, not just layering up your part to something. That was the idea.
Interesting. Let's have a listen to some. I should say, throughout this kind of chat, we'll play a few short extracts, and then you can check out the full EP, which is available now. There'll be a link somewhere. Go to efpirecords.com, and then from there you'll be able to go to Johnny's Bandcamp page and check out the full EP. Also later on this program, we'll present the pieces in the entirety in a slightly different format, but we'll get to that. No surprises, no spoilers yet. But anyway, for now, we'll just hear an extract from this first study that Johnny's written. This is his quartet playing. So Johnny on drums, Seth Bennett bass, Graham South trumpet, Mark Hanslip saxophone. Great. So that was just an extract from Johnny's first study in lockdown. Hopefully you kind of picked up on some of the things that he was talking about before that. Let's move on now to the second study. So was this a kind of exploring those constraints of the situation kind of in a different way, or similar ideas and concepts?
Yes, it was. So I think I'd written that first piece came quite quickly, and then the second and third I had the ideas for. And I'd begun to think, I wonder actually, I know I set out saying, oh no, this won't work, or I wasn't trying to make something that would work over the internet, but then I started to think, oh well, actually, I wonder if this could be used to do like a live session. At that time, I didn't know of any method of doing it apart from just over Zoom, like this, which isn't great. But I was thinking, okay, well, if that is the case, what about if I bring latency to the forefront? You know, the delay that you get to the forefront, and so actually have that as that is what is supposed to happen. You know, that I've got the horns playing two different melody lines that answer each other, but they're offset, and they're supposed to be like tumble through, and they're not supposed to line up or anything. You can imagine it like a conversation at a pub where someone, you remember them? Do you remember conversations at pubs?
Seems a long time ago.
Oh, I can't wait. But yeah, so imagine a conversation at a pub where you know, one person's said a bit, and then another one is saying, "Oh yeah, well yeah, but what about this?" And yeah, okay. I know, but what? Yeah, but it's that sort of like, you know, jumping over each other.
And actually, I think that's possibly something that we've found with Zoom calls as well. You know, like in a real life conversation, you know, you kind of get these other cues from people when they want to speak, but maybe you don't get so clearly on Zoom or Skype or whatever. And I don't know if people have been in Zoom meetings with you know, a decent number of people, and it can kind of quickly descend into carnage because of that, and there's just people talking on top of each other all the time. Maybe that's just my Zoom meetings, I don't know.
Yeah. No, mine are we're all very respectful of each other, so I don't know who you're mixing with.
Yeah, riff-raff.
Yeah. So that was the point of this piece. And how did we record this? So we started with the trumpet and the tenor sax just recording their parts without hearing anything. So they were just recording just their parts, because it was their turn to have to go first, basically. But yeah, I made them do it separately, because I thought it might lead to some interesting things. Because I think Graham the two parts start at different times. One starts after the other, and if Graham had started second or whatever, and had already heard what Mark was playing, then he'd just easily be able to fit in, and it would sound very neat and good. But I didn't want good. I wanted chaotic, and so I wanted this sort of like tumbling. Nobody really sure where who was speaking, and having these pauses of well, oh, what are you? Oh no, is it me? Okay, right, yeah, and blah blah blah. So I wanted all of that sort of stuff, and what else was there to this? And then afterwards, Seth and I recorded our parts to it, and now I actually can't remember if maybe I waited for Seth to put his part down before I put my final part into it.
So I got the nice gig this time.
So I got the nice one. Yeah. Or did oh no, I definitely did that, yeah. So I waited until everyone had finished their parts, and I just put mine on the top. So just because as a drummer you never get to do that, so
that's true. With this one again, with the like time stamps for people to aim to, or is it?
No, so I only did the timestamps on the first movement. So I was sort of exploring that, having these markers which we would hit throughout it. And actually, I forgot to say the end of the last piece, there's no end time. That I've not set a duration for the end, and the end was designed to be as long as anyone wanted it to be. So in theory, and I think it sort of did happen a little bit, but in theory, everybody could finish apart from the trumpet, and the trumpet could keep going and going and going. But that didn't happen. But
I mean, that could happen in a gig as well, right? If
absolutely,
yeah,
absolutely. So this is all of those sorts of spontaneous. Trying to make sure that it's allowed here, which you don't get from when you're just, you've written a tune and it goes like this, and everybody put their parts down.
And it sounds it's 114 bars long.
Yeah. Exactly. And it sounds really neat, and it sounds really together and impressive. But I'm not about neat, together, and impressive. So, but yeah, I'm sure. Well, shall we listen to the extract?
Yeah.
So at the ending of the piece, but hopefully it gives you an idea. So you could hear that. So Mark actually finished his take about maybe 20 seconds before Graham finished his. And I should reiterate that Graham and Mark weren't listening to each other for that bit, and it just, I think it really works. Like listening to them, it sounds like they're playing off of each other.
But I think what you said at the beginning, like the fact that you all play together so often and in so many different kind of circumstances and situations as well, you can almost hear what they're doing in your mind, maybe, like, and kind of imagine it and respond to what you imagine that they're doing.
Yeah. I get, yes, definitely. And I think I maybe wasn't that conscious of that fact when I was doing it, but you're absolutely right. You know, I played with Seth for a long time in many different groups as well. And yeah, he's definitely, and Graham is definitely the trumpet player that I've played with the most yeah, so that's definitely there. It must definitely be there. And I wasn't so conscious, you know, like I wasn't thinking, oh, Graham will probably do this or Seth will probably do this.
But like it's this kind of subconscious level.
It
maybe.
Absolutely must be there.
Great. Let's move on to the third study then. So what was the kind of, what's going on here?
So this one, I thought this was just an experiment where I just thought, if nobody hears each other, so if nobody gets the privilege of being the last one to part on the music, or if nobody hears each other, I've got a piece of music that we all play, and then I just take each 4 parts and just shove them together and see what happens. So I was taking my influence from Anthony Braxton's more like large music that he does a lot of, and I've always been really into that. And there's something that Seth and I do a lot. We play in a piano trio called Fragments, which is a lot more open than the quartet. And there's something that we do quite a lot. You know, if we're playing a swing, and then like Seth might just drastically change his tempo. So we're both playing like really quite driving swing, but at completely different tempos. And I really like that feeling of like it's almost like, you know, it's swinging really hard when 2 of you are doing it, but then as soon as you've got these 2 different tempos just swinging really hard, it almost, you know, it like doubles how much it swings for me. Like genuinely, it feels like really, really great. So based off of that, I thought, you know, I'll get Seth to just play, you know, whatever he does, walking bass line, whatever he does, just really swing, and I allowed him to change tempo throughout or whatever, and then I did the same thing as well, you know, and like we're both changing speed and changing tempo at different times, and you get this like, it's all this like like a clown car with a square wheel, you know, that sort of feel, and it's great. It's
analogy, I like that.
Yeah. So that was the base of this, and I thought, well, okay, if we're swinging, it'd be nice to have like like maybe I wrote this short angular bebop style head, but I was thinking, well, it might not necessarily work if both of the horns just try and, you know, just play. Maybe it would. That's my next experiment, maybe. But so what I did was that I had one of them start with it and another one finish with it, and then they're doing more textural stuff at the other end. So they sort of cross over in the middle, and there's improv in the middle. And have a direction. They each have a direction that they're heading. So this goes back to what I was saying before about it's giving you something to respond to, something to react against. You've got this written melody, and then it descends into some improv, and then it ends up with like long held notes. And so it's going to affect your improv, whether you start playing the melody or whether you start playing the more textual stuff or whatever. It's going to affect your improv. And so they both have a direction. And the idea was that they were sort of crossing the middle. And that does happen. I think it sounds good. I think it sounds good. Maybe it doesn't. But it was a lot of fun to do. It was a lot of fun. That was kind of the main reason for doing all of this. It had to be fun. I didn't want to just do, put a click on and try and put down my, play some bebop to a click or whatever. I didn't want to do that because for me that is not fun. But this is just a bit. I don't know. It's a bit different. I was just wanting to try stuff out.
Yeah, I think it's great. I think it's a really, like I said at the start, like a really interesting and innovative kind of approach to. I think that what's come out of it is really, really cool, really, really interesting, and especially to hear you kind of talk about the process, kind of adds a lot to listening to it.
Yeah. Well, just before I play the extract, it's so regardless of the results of this, it was such a great, an interesting thing for me to. It definitely helped like open up some different compositional ideas. It definitely got me thinking about things in a very different way. I would not have written these tunes had it not been for the lockdown. It definitely did force me to come up with some new stuff. So whether the results were any good or not, I mean, well, they're studies, aren't they?
Exactly.
So they can.
Cool. Well, we
on that note,
look forward to seeing what future compositions come out of this work. Then,
cool. I've already started thinking of other things that I want to do, and other tunes, other ideas to explore. So,
do you mean for this kind of situation, or
just until we.
I mean, it's in the nicest possible way, Johnny, but let's hope we're out of lockdown before you get a chance to put those together.
You're
probably right. Yeah. Well, let's hear an extract from this third study then. Great. So that was an extract from the third of 3 studies in lockdown, composed by Johnny Hunter and performed by the Johnny Hunter Quartet. Those 3 studies form an EP, which is called Studies in Lockdown. And that EP is released on Efpi Records and available now. So if you go to fprecords.com, like I say, from there you can go to Johnny's Bandcamp page, and then the EP will be there. So please do check it out in full. And tell all your friends. So just to finish off, Johnny, you kind of touched on at the beginning that these studies were kind of a response to the limitations of playing online. And you're right, at the kind of the very early stages of this lockdown situation, kind of there wasn't really much alternative to, much opportunity to net together in real time, other than Zoom, which is kind of, not really designed for that. It's designed for kind of obviously conversation where a few seconds latency isn't a massive deal, but obviously when you perform music together, that does cause issues. kind of as the weeks have gone by, musicians have found ways to play together and have made things work. There's a few different things, software kind of interfaces or platforms that people have been using to really great results. And so that kind of sparked off an idea in you, right?
Well, yes. So it was talking to Mark Hansett, and he had been looking into this thing called Jack Trip, which, as far as I'm aware now, is still the best method of playing with musicians in real time. But it's way above my head in terms of, like, you need to. Well, it's quite complicated to get set up, and I did try, but I needed my hand to be held through it. But as we speak, I've still not set that up, and it should be. I should point out that Sam Leake, the piano player from London, I think, did actually do a 2-hour video on how to set it up. So if you're at all interested, you should definitely check that out. But that's 2 hours, man. That's but no, so what I tried is this plugin called Audio Movers, which is basically, it means that you can send your audio to somebody else and they can send it to you. And the clunkiness that Zoom has, if I'm right in thinking, well, I might be wrong. Someone will correct me on this, but it stops you. When your computers are connecting to each other over Zoom, or they're constantly talking to each other, checking that it's still there, that the other computer's still there, and that's what contributes to a lot of the delay and the to the lag. And I believe what Jack Trip and Audio Movers do is they stop them doing that. So once you've got a connection with a computer, it assumes it's still there. I gather that's why. And so like if you call somebody on the phone, the latency is not that great. You know, it's not that high. You know, so it surely is possible. And as I said before, I was thinking that, oh well, okay, cut all of that bit out, because it's. I think people can explain it a lot better than I can. But,
no, it's interesting. I knew that.
Oh, okay, this is like a pub conversation where you know, I've had a drink and I'm having a go at explaining something that I have no idea about.
Well, I'll tell you what. Let's just play. We'll play what we did. So we used Audio Movers. We also thought we'd try it with different musicians, right? As kind of...
Well, so I thought that the point of the tunes that I wrote, although I said before that I had the benefit of using my quartet, and I was after, you know, whatever I wrote, I knew that they would understand what I was getting at. But in theory, when I was writing these tunes, it could be used by anyone. Anyone could play any instrumentation of anyone from around the world can play. It doesn't matter if local latency is built into it. So I thought, oh well, I'll just try it with different musicians. As it turned out, it ended up being quite a similar lineup to my quartet: trumpet, sax, double bass, and drums. But that's just because of, you know, timings with people. People couldn't make it. But I had hoped to get, you know, a trombone player from Switzerland to demonstrate all these people from around the world can get involved. But yeah, that's for another time. As it happened, I got a very fine quartet together to give this a go, and try things out playing remotely, and it was a huge amount of fun.
Yeah, so I'm in Switzerland at the moment, and obviously Nani's and all the rest of the musicians involved were in the UK, but I was kind of listening in using this Audio Movers platform. And yeah, kind of after each take or each tune that you played, it was really nice just to hear you all go, oh, that was so much fun just to play with someone and interact with the musician, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
It was,
Yes,
really nice.
I was speaking to a friend of mine about this, and he was also a bass player, and he was saying, "Yeah, I don't know. I don't think that would scratch the itch because it's not the same. It isn't the same, but it definitely did scratch something. Like it definitely felt good, and it was it felt like getting back to a bit of normality. And yes, there are problems. The latency wasn't an issue because for this music because that was built into it." And you know the tunes are quite descriptive or prescriptive, I should say. You know, like they move through in such a way that, you know, like even if you can't hear two of the other musicians, even if there's an audio dropout at some point, you're still all moving together. And there were a couple of technical issues, but on the whole, it works remarkably well, and it felt really good. Felt really
cool.
good.
Yeah, it felt really good to listen to as well. Yeah, it's great. So let's play out with that. We're going to hear all three movements recorded live. Yeah, live all together using audio movers, all playing everybody's parts in their own homes and just hearing each other in real time and reacting. Well, within kind of half a second, I think we got the latency, which was, pretty good.
Yeah. And I should just say thank you so much to you, Ben, for helping set that up, because as I said, I need my hand holding through or anything to do with that. And also I want to say a real big thank you to the musicians who tried it out with me. We've got Graham on trumpet, Graham South, Dee Byrne on alto sax, and Hugh Williams on double bass, Hugh V. Williams on double bass.
Yeah, so Hugh and Dee in London, Cheshire, and Graham in Manchester, all playing together live. So yeah, we'll play out with those three studies. And yeah, once again, thanks very much, Johnny, for your time and the insights into these pieces, and the Johnny Hunter Quartet, especially the new EP Studies in Lockdown. But they've also got 2 albums on Efpi Records, with a third on the way shortly, so keep an eye out for that. So yeah, thanks again, Johnny. And here's, I don't know, let's think of a band name. The Johnny Hunter
Experience.
the Johnny Hunter Experience. Perfect. Here we go.
Thanks to FP Records for that, and we've got more from them at the same time tomorrow. It's tea time, isn't it, Steve?
It absolutely is. It's time for an afternoon tea. I think I have my Scrabble mug ready. If we get behind the queue, we'll get a nice seat by the window.
We're back at 5 o'clock.
We're leaving you for a couple of hours whilst we replenish our energy, and you too. So what have we got for you in store at 5 o'clock?
Well, we've got the round table where we talk about releases from emerging bands, which I'm part of. I think that was actually how come I got roped into all of this. I agreed to do the round table, and next thing I know, I'm co-hosting with about 24 hours to go. You know what I was thinking though, Steve? It does reflect very well what the musicians who are playing this weekend often have to do, which is fly by the seat of their pants. Yeah. You know, it's literally like they're suddenly in the spotlight and have got to talk and play, and what that experience is like right now. We've also got concert footage coming up, including Nikki Iles' jazz orchestra, but we'll be back in a couple of hours with more details. You can also check everything on the website.
Great. See you then.
See you at 5.